Our story begins in a very stormy atmosphere, with lightning splitting the darkness of the night. In this terrifying moment, we see the assassin Major observing his target's location. But suddenly he turns around, discovering he's not alone. There's another assassin with his eyes on the same target. Upon discovering that the second assassin is the infamous silent killer, Major laments his bad luck for crossing paths with such a professional. However, this won't make him abandon his mission, as they both know failure is not an option. He moves with great speed, throwing a number of daggers at the silent killer, whose body turns transparent, letting the daggers pass through him. Seeing that a long-range attack is useless, Major decides to close the distance and engages him with his sword. But the silent killer is no amateur. He skillfully blocks every strike with his own dagger. In an instant, the silent killer breaks Major's sword with a metal piece he has. Despite this, Major was prepared and draws a hidden blade, stabbing the silent killer with. At that moment, a look of surprise crosses his face as he realizes his opponent has disappeared. The next second, the silent killer appears directly behind him. A fierce exchange of blows ensues at high speed, but the advantage lies with the silent killer, who disarms the sword, plunges his dagger into Major's elbow, delivers a kick that breaks his leg and brings him to the ground. Major screams in agony. Finally, the sword, having completed its journey through the air, finds its resting place in its owner's chest. Within seconds, we see the silent killer standing next to the bed of the target, who is asleep and completely unaware. After a moment's hesitation, the assassin firmly grips his dagger with both hands and decisively brings it down upon his target. In a certain high school, the students were spending an ordinary day, specifically during break time. You'd find some of them eating and chatting with friends, and the athlete, Sato, the student council president, finishing up his tasks. Amidst all this, there's Akira. To put it plainly, he's living a life of complete isolation. None of his classmates really know him, and this is because his walk and gaze all indicate a sideline, peripheral personality. You know that guy in your class you forget is even there? That's Akira exactly. Anyway, Akira was sitting by himself as usual, reading novels on his phone. Out of nowhere, one of his classmates says to him, "What, you're reading that novel too? Since we have similar taste, I want you to recommend me a few things." Akira replies that he reads anything that comes his way just to kill time, and that's that. Suddenly, Akira's phone glitches and a black hole appears out of the ceiling. Before any of the students can move from their spots, a magic circle forms around the classroom, and a fog fills the place. Then they find themselves in a strange location. As they look around, they hear the voice of an old man who appears to be a sorcerer, informing them that the king wishes to speak with them. From behind the sorcerer, the king appears with the princess by his side. The students all ask, "Where are we? What do you want from us? What's even happened?" The sorcerer then bangs his staff on the ground to silence them. The king welcomes them to the kingdom of Ristus, the largest human kingdom on the continent, and informs them that in the world of Morgana, they are currently under attack by demons. Since the hero is the only one who can defeat the demon king, they have been summoned from their world to this one. The sorcerer chimes in, letting them know that one among them is the hero. To find out who, each one needs to place their hand on the magic crystal. One of them volunteers enthusiastically, and the moment he places his hand on the crystal, a status window appears before him with his personal information, most importantly his specialty, and of course, it turns out he's not the hero. The students start going one after another to discover their specialties and the powers they gained upon arriving in this world. Once they realize they can see their status windows themselves without the crystal, each one tries and checks for themselves. The guy who was talking to Akira finds out his specialty is Wind Mage. When he asks Akira what his is, they answer for him, Assassin. He says to Akira, "No way man, it's not like anyone notices you anyway, star." At that moment the hero appears, it's Sato. Everyone is surprised by Akira because his power level is much higher compared to all his classmates, even the hero himself. With only a few students left, Akira decides to use his stealth skill to hide, as he doesn't trust the king and princess, feeling they are plotting something. Besides, he doesn't know anything about this world, and it's better to be cautious. Once the students finish the examination, the sorcerer tells them to rest for now until suitable equipment is prepared for them. Akira leaves with them while still invisible, thanking his luck that things went smoothly, but he is shocked when he notices surveillance cameras in the palace. At the same time, one of the knights in the palace looks in Akira's direction and smiles, as if he can see him. At night, Akira stays in an empty room, changes his clothes and leaves the castle to explore the area and gather any useful information. The moment he sees the city, he confirms he's in another world. He heads to the highest point in the castle, uses his stealth skill and overhears the king asking the princess, "Any news about those kids?" She replies, "They're sleeping. They're just children who came from a place with no magic. They won't pose any problems for us." He then orders her to continue the plan and emphasizes that she must prevent them from entering the archives to learn more information than necessary, ensuring their plan succeeds. At that moment, Akira was standing behind the king. After hearing every word, he says to himself that he doesn't know their exact plans, but he's sure they are not up to any good. He draws his dagger and gets ready to kill the king, who is unaware of his presence, but he finds he can't move. The next day we see the students gathered in the king's hall, having a royal breakfast. Akira is still invisible, sitting and eating 2 loaves of bread, thinking, should he cancel his stealth and tell his classmates what he heard or what? His thoughts are interrupted by Sato's voice, who says to them, look guys, since our power increased upon arriving in this world, I want us all to use this power to help the king and protect the kingdom from the demons. They all get excited and immediately agree with him. Akira says to himself, of course you're just a bunch of fools living in the bliss of ignorance while I'm suffering alone here. After breakfast they head to the training ground. We see them gathered before the captain of the knights, who introduces himself as Saren, with the title The Last Handsome. His assistant Gil tells him, hey, tone down your fancy act a bit. You're ruining your image, you know. Saran continues, saying he will take on the task of training them and that after 1 month they will enter the dungeon to test their abilities. Since he knows they have no combat experience whatsoever, he will take on the task of preparing them. On the other side, Akira, still invisible, decides he must look for information elsewhere and leave the place. Saren asks Gil to take over the training and goes after Akira. Akira freezes in shock because this is the first time someone has detected him. He asks himself, did I cancel my stealth or what? The answer comes from Saren, who informs him that his stealth is still active, but he can see him because his eye is special and can see differences in temperature. Akira says to him, I see, so what should we do about this problem, and draws his dagger. Saren answers that the matter is a bit big, but the important thing is that the king doesn't know. Since things are okay between them now, the 2 of them. Akira tells Saren that he wants to enter the archives because he's in the dark and doesn't know anything about this world. Saren asks him about the level of his stealth skill. Akira replies that it's at the maximum level, but all his other skills are at level 1, and he doesn't know how to raise them. Here Saren offers to train him and teach him how to level up his skills, since he won't find that information in the archives anyway. Of course, Akira gets excited because he's living a fantasy adventure like the ones he read about in novels and legends, but he still wants to return to his world because his family is surely worried about him. Saren tells him, you're right, family can't be replaced, my friend. At that time, Akira asks him if he knows a way to return to his world. Saren replies that he doesn't know, unfortunately, but Akira will need to get stronger because if he dies before returning, everything he's done will be for nothing. Akira says he doesn't like taking help from anyone without something in return. Saren asks him to tell him about his world, and in return, they'll be even. Akira agrees. We quickly learn that this world has 4 races: humans, demons, elves, and monsters. Each race lives in its own region. And so Akira begins his training under Saren's guidance, while the rest of the class trains with Gil. After a period of training, we find Saren enthusiastically telling Gil about the information he learned from Akira about his world, their strange inventions, and that they came from Japan, the same country the first hero came from. Plus, his stealth skill is at the maximum level, just like the first heroes. At that moment Akira arrives. Gil leaves as soon as Akira enters. Saren hands Akira a book and says, I used to go to the archives every day to read a bit, and I found this dangerous book. Saren replies that the book is indeed dangerous and contains plans for a coup against the king, and he wrote it himself, hiding it in the archives disguised as a cookbook because he knew Akira would find it. He explains that the king has gone mad and is willing to risk everything to change the world's laws, and they can't allow that. But since the loyalty of the royal knights is to the monarchy, it's a bit difficult. Akira replies that after reading the book, he understood that Saren wants to overthrow the king in a proper way, but it would be easier for Akira, who has no connection to this world, to just kill the king himself. He tells him that he infiltrated the king's room on their first day, stood right next to him, and the king didn't sense him. He was moments away from killing him but couldn't do it. Saren tells him that's for the best, because killing is not a simple matter at all, and even if his specialty is assassin, there's no need to get his hands dirty with blood since he plans to return to his world. Akira says with relief, you're right. I don't know how I would have faced my mother and little sister if I returned to them as a murderer. Saren makes him understand that there's no problem with being an assassin who understands the value of life. Akira asks him why he's so interested in him and also told him about the coup plan. Saren answers that his expectations for Akira are high, especially since he didn't follow the herd like his other classmates. He thought for himself, and people like him are the ones who succeed in facing difficulties and overcoming them to reach their goal. Akira says quietly that this is the first time anyone has noticed or praised him. Saren says to him, since you like that, how about helping me with my coup before you return to your world? At the end of his month of training, we find the heroes embarking on their dungeon exploration with the night squad led by Saren, amidst crowds of people who are happy for them and cheering them on. Akira notices a girl looking at them with anger. He disappears and reappears behind her asking, Why are you looking at them like that? The girl is surprised by his sudden appearance and tells him that people treat them like heroes, but they don't know the amount of sacrifices that were made to summon them. Akira replies that he doesn't know. She says to him, "When you find out, come talk to me because I feel we'll meet again," then leaves him and walks away. We cut to the dungeon, where we see the guys fighting fiercely against monsters that are piling on them from everywhere. They clearly look exhausted and fed up. Amidst the battle, one of them leans against a wall next to him, and by sheer bad luck he steps on a trap. The wall collapses, and behind it, an orc appears and attacks them. Akira says to Saren, "I think we should retreat now before things get worse." Saren replies that his thinking is correct and his performance was good for their first battle. He uses the holy sword skill to wipe out the orcs. They all run towards the exit, but they are surprised by a second group of orcs waiting for them. With frustration taking over, Sato remembers that the princess gave him a smoke bomb to repel monsters and asked him to use it in times of danger. Without any hesitation, he throws the bomb at the orcs, happy that they can finally escape. But they are shocked when the orcs disappear and in their place a minotaur appears, a tough slippery monster that only appears in the deep levels of the dungeon. Akira attacks the minotaur without hesitation, but it deftly dodges his attack. Akira uses the pillars around him to try and plunge his dagger into its neck, but he is shocked when the dagger breaks. He dodges the minotaur's attack and stops next to Sato, who is on the ground trying to lift his sword. Akira tells him not to push himself beyond his limits, especially since his arm is broken. Sato replies that he must fight because if he can't protect his classmates, no one else will. At that moment, Akira takes a sword from his classmate, attacks the minotaur and asks Sato, "Well, and who will protect you? Besides, the hero's power is important for saving the world." Sato says to him, "Well, and who will protect our class?" Akira replies, "Of course each one of them can protect themselves. That's what we trained them for all last month." At that moment Sato has a mental breakdown and starts talking to himself like a madman. Akira becomes suspicious of his behavior and asks one of his female classmates to use healing magic on him in case he's cursed or under the influence of a spell. Indeed, Akira's suspicion turns out to be correct. He asks his classmate to continue treating Sato and tells Saren to use the move he knows. Saren says, "Okay, begin on my signal," and uses the lightning flash skill to electrocute the minotaur. At the same time, Akira quickly moves behind the minotaur and uses shadow magic. So what will... After a few seconds, Akira closes the shadow circle around the minotaur's head, severing it to join the rest of its body, which disappears into the shadows before the eyes of all present, who look worried and afraid. Akira then takes a breather for a few seconds, but suddenly shadow thorns emerge as if trying to escape his control, and Akira struggles with great difficulty to control them until he hears Saren's voice behind him, reassuring him and telling him to stay calm. Indeed, Akira follows his advice, calms down and succeeds in controlling the thorns, canceling the shadow magic, and takes a labored breath after the tremendous effort he made. Saren tells him he looks like he's run out of charge and shut down. Akira smiles back, saying they survived that disaster. After they return, we see Saren talking to Akira, praising his performance and thanking him because they managed to return without any losses thanks to him. Akira replies that Saren is the one who helped him control that shadow magic, not to mention trained him. Saren says it's the first time he's heard of this additional shadow magic skill, but it's clearly a very powerful and dangerous skill at the same time. This is because it drains the user and is difficult to control. So he asks Akira to use it cautiously and only in extreme necessity. When Akira replies that he understands, Saren tells him to forget all that. The important thing is he has a cool gift for him. He pulls out a katana and says, "Take this, the weapon of the first hero made by himself." Akira takes the sword and looks at it for a moment, then asks Saren in confusion why he's giving it to him instead of to the hero. Saren explains that the hero already has the sacred sword, and besides, the king would notice if the hero had this katana. Akira says, "How would he notice?" "I don't understand." Saren informs him that he stole the sword from the palace treasury and hid it. Akira draws the sword and says with a smile that he will accept it gladly, of course. When he asks about the sword's name, Saren tells him it's written on the blade, but he can't read it. So Akira looks at the blade and learns its name as the Heavenly Knight Sword. Furthermore, the first hero wished for this sword to help his successor accomplish his mission. Akira says the first hero seems like a decent person and wishes he could have met him. Saren says, speaking of the hero, what happened to Sato? Akira explains that the curse affecting him is strong, and no matter how they tried to break it, they failed. Saren says he knows who is behind the curse. At night, we see the princess in her room standing in front of a magic crystal, casting a curse on Sato to turn him into a puppet in her hands that she can control. But she is surprised when someone breaks into the place, shatters the crystal with his sword. She asks him, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" He ignores her and says that by doing this the curse on the hero should be broken. The princess says, "How dare you enter a lady's room like this in the middle of the night?" He angrily replies that ladies don't use curses to control people, and she should be a witch, not a princess. When he asks her the reason for casting the curse, she answers coldly that everything she does is to serve the king, nothing more. He asks her why she listens to him and what they want to achieve. She replies indifferently that everything she does is for the king, so he leaves her and goes away. At that time the princess discovers she has enough crystals left for the rest of her classmates. On the other side, we find Akira giving the crystal to Saren and informing him that things turned out as he expected. So Saren says those bastards haven't given up yet. When Akira says he wants to see the prince to know the reason for her actions and that he saw her face, Saren says she is just a puppet in the king's hands and asks him to go sleep because it's late, and it's better if he doesn't sleep in the castle. Akira asks why. Saren replies that the princess casts her curse on everyone except Sato, but since she doesn't know who he is, the curse won't affect him. Akira says, "You mean she might try to kill me since she can't control me, right?" Saren confirms his words, letting him know they won't leave the castle without looking for him there. Here Akira says, "You won't blame me for revealing myself to the princess, will you?" Saren replies that he considers his action mere teenage recklessness, and as an adult he should deal with such problems. Akira says, "I wish the people in my world were like you, man, I swear." Saren replies, since that's the case he'll take him with him. He's a man of his world. Akira says, "No, man, you'll mess up the words? I don't want to give you a headache again." The next day, Akira wakes up to the sound of commotion coming from the direction of the castle, so he goes to see what's happening. He finds Sato and the rest of his classmates and the knights gathered. The first thing Sato does when he sees him is ask where he was. Sato looks at the ground sadly and says, "Commander Saren, of course." Akira doesn't wait and passes through the knights until he finds Saren lying on the ground with a dagger stuck in his heart. He kneels beside him and says, "What happened?" And then one of his classmates replies, "Stop acting. Isn't this your dagger stuck in his chest?" Akira says, "How? And you all saw my dagger break when we were in the cave?" Another one replies that he was suspicious of him from the beginning because he always disappears and only appears during training. At that moment, Akira confirms that he is under the princess's protection and that he fell into the trap. Sato tells them, "Wait, guys, you can't accuse Akira of murder for a small reason like this." But his words have no effect and the king sentences Akira to death for killing Saren. Of course, as soon as the soldiers hear the verdict, they attack Akira without any hesitation. Akira uses his stealth skill and escapes from the place after seeing the looks of triumph in the princess's eyes. Akira talks to Gil, who informs him that Saren was killed by the king's special assassination squad, named Night Ravens. Furthermore, he is also a target for them. That's why Saren left some things for him in his room that will help him on his journey. He goes to take the things Saren left and says sadly, "You expected all this to happen, and you still risked yourself, Commander." At night we see the king talking to the princess, saying he didn't expect Saren to die so easily. The princess replies to him that she cursed everyone except the hero, and all they needed was a pretext to declare war on the east. The king says they need those kids in the war as soldiers, and the runaway who escapes from them will surely die alone, but as a precaution, he will ask the Night Ravens to finish him off. The princess replies that all his requests are orders. The next day we find him in the cave, remembering Saren's words that the best place to hide is the cave. But he has to be careful so he doesn't run out of water and die of thirst inside. Besides, it's the best place to level up and increase his strength. The deeper he goes into the cave, the stronger the enemies he'll encounter. Akira says since the cave is this good and useful for everyone, why doesn't everyone enter? Saren replies because it's very dangerous, and even his stealth skill won't work against monsters with strong senses of smell and hearing. And even if he raises his level enough, he will be able to hide his sound, smell, and even his body heat. We see Master Akira in the cave beating up monsters and moving from one floor to the next. Our brother Akira marks each floor he passes with a number so he knows exactly where he is. Days and nights pass for Akira inside the cave fighting monsters until he reaches the 69th floor. This guy seems stronger than Saitama, right? Anyway, after finishing off the monsters, he remembers that Saren told him if he could reach level 100, he would gain a special skill that would help him greatly. The best way to level up is to defeat the boss monsters that appear every 10 floors in the cave. But since life isn't easy, these bosses are strong. As soon as he enters the boss room, the door locks and won't open until one of them dies. Akira enters the floor 70 boss, which is a mantis lion with a troublesome tail, of course. The boss immediately attacks him fiercely with its claws. Akira barely dodges its attacks, but the snake venom hits his leg and slows him down. Here the manticore hits him with its tail, throwing him far away. Akira falls to the ground and says to himself that if he dies here, he can't avenge Saren or even return home. At that moment he decides to use his power and activates shadow magic. Thorns emerge and attack the boss, cutting it apart without any mercy. Akira loses consciousness due to his injury and the shadow magic envelops his entire body, starting to heal his wounds. Back at the castle, we find Sato talking to his classmates after breakfast, asking them to help him fight the Demon King. They refuse, using the excuse that they are still affected by Akira's killing of Saran. Sato looks around and says to himself, "This must be the effect of the princess's curse that Gil told me about." So he tells them, "Well, if that's the case, then forget it, I'll go alone." Before he leaves, some of his classmates who excelled in training join him. When Sato asks them why they are joining him, the magic dispeller answers that none of those present were affected by the curse. Chio tells him that it must be related to the crystals he shattered with his sword, but he doesn't remember exactly what happened. At the same time, Gil is watching him and says that his ability to manipulate people is stronger than the curse, and thus he has carried out Saren's last instructions. He wishes the hero and his team success in their mission. On the way, Kyo remembers meeting Akira when he was working and being asked not to tell anyone, especially his sister. After some talk, he discovers that their younger siblings are friends, and he says that even if he was under the influence of the curse, he should have helped Akira. On the other side, Akira wakes up and is surprised that he is safe. So he looks at his information window and finds that his health points are full and all his wounds have disappeared. He says, "How? I had 3 broken armors, not to mention the poison in my leg." And he adds that his shadow magic level increased from 3 to 5 at once. Something seems to be happening. He thinks about the topic for a while, and since he can't find an explanation, he decides not to worry about it now and to continue on his way. So he continues his journey in the cave until he reaches the 75th floor. While walking, he is surprised by a slime falling from the ceiling, so he retreats backwards and finishes it off with 1 hit. He is surprised when the slime disappears and a girl made of thread appears in front of him. So he uses the Eye of the World skill to get information about her, but he is shocked by the amount of information and events he sees, so he cancels the skill immediately. At that moment, the girl wakes up and he asks about her condition, knowing she is injured and has only 2 HP left. However, she replies that she is fine and asks him where they are. He answers that they are on the 75th floor of the cave. So she says, "What are you doing here, Akira?" He replies that he came to level up and increase his strength. He says to her, "I know you saw my information, but let's take it easy and you can ask me even my name." But she doesn't answer him and he is surprised when she faints. So he says, "I knew she was faking from the beginning." He carries her and goes to a safe place in the cave with water. After a while, the girl wakes up feeling hungry. So he gives her water and tells her that the best way to treat a fever is to maintain hydration and body temperature during sleep. She replies that she couldn't sleep because she was so hungry. So he says okay, and gives her some of the food he prepares. She asks him why he knows all this information about patient care. He explains that his mother is sick, so he necessarily had to learn all this. She looks at the number behind him and asks what it is. He explains to her that he wrote that number because they are on the 69th floor, and he does this on every floor so he doesn't get lost. She says, "Weren't we on the 75th floor a little while ago? What made you come up here if you came to level up?" He replies that this is the nearest place with water. So she says, "So you carried me all the way here?" She tells him that she is from the royal family, and that this is the first time someone has helped her like this, and she thanks him. They go to sleep. The next day, they reach the 80th floor and we see the girl helping Akira fight the monster with her gravity magic. After they finish, Akira asks her why she is following him since her condition has improved. She replies that she is coincidentally going in the same direction he is going. Of course, this is an excuse and she doesn't want to leave him. So he says, "Well, if that's the case then I won't protect you, rely on yourself." She replies that she knows he has superhuman strength but she is not so weak that she can't protect herself. As soon as they enter the boss room, a blue dragon appears and attacks them with its fiery breath. They dodge its attack and Akira immediately uses his stealth skill while the girl uses gravity magic to make the dragon lose its balance. Akira seizes the opportunity and attacks the dragon, but he is surprised that the dragon knows his location and hits him. The girl informs him that the dragon tracks magical energy and asks him to spread his energy throughout the area to hide himself. The dragon flies again and attacks Akira, who is standing there thinking about what to do about the problem he is in. Before the dragon pounces on him, he attacks it with shadow magic and distracts it. In the next moment, he flies into the air, plunges his sword into the dragon's head, and moves the girl away before the dragon falls on her and literally flattens her. The girl asks him in amazement, "What did you just do?" He replies that he is not an expert in magic to distribute his energy as she said, so he gathered the magical energy around her and struck the dragon with it. The dragon's body begins to glow and the light fills the entire place. So I wonder what will happen and what awaits them at the end of this cave. And with this, friend otaku, today's episode of the story of Akira ends with. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.